Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small! De la Vega! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Gold Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today for an irregular episode of How the West Will Be Won is Joe Lowry, one of our favorite people, representing Backheeled.com, which is, of course, a partner of Sounder at Heart. Welcome back to the show, Joe.
Hey, Jeremiah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's always good to catch up. So I'll just share. I just was listening to a podcast. You do a little, like a sort of a mini podcast. It's like 10 minutes. It's a very easy listen. You give people some useful information that they can take into their life. And I just finished listening to the episode you did last week, which you were talking about teams that should be a little worried. And the one that I think for the most part you nailed it. And I think actually all your observations are fair. You noted that the Timbers are in some trouble. You noted that the Rapids are in some trouble. I would say both those situations got actually worse this week. But one of the other teams you highlighted was the Vancouver Whitecaps, who you are understandably expressing some concern about over their injury situation. And it's pretty bad. I don't know if people in Seattle fully appreciate, but as bad as the Sounders injury situation has been, the Whitecaps may be worse depending on how you look at it. Like against the Sounders, they didn't have any natural center backs. Tristan Blackman's hurt. Why am I blanking on the other starting
Ranko
center back?
Veselinovic. Yeah, and also the two center backs they signed in the summer to replace those guys. Yeah, they're also hurt.
Right. So they're like sort of deputizing players at this point. Mateus Laborda was the guy who started in the Sounders. He actually looked pretty good there. And Ralph Priso, I believe, is the other one that's been playing. And whether or not that's a long-term strategy, like how long they can go with that remains to be seen. But they did look fantastic against the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, you know, they gave up some chances, but they win 4-1. The Earthquakes are not a horrible team. They are definitely a dangerous attacking team. Would you say that the Whitecaps answered some of your concerns this week?
Some, although I care less about the result against San Jose, who you're right they're not a tragic team. What they are is a tragic defensive team, and so that the Whitecaps put up 4 goals on them is not a surprise. That Bruce Arena has been as open tactically with San Jose and with this personnel as he has all year long, just never backing down from it, has really truly surprised me to my core in how he's gone about things in San Jose. So there's lots of open lanes. There are multiple sequences where San Jose are trying to high press Vancouver, and they look like they've never seen an off-ball rotation before. And they just don't seem to know how to close space and cover those players rotating into central midfield. So that Vancouver put up goals does not surprise me. It does not really move the needle for me. What does is Ryan Gauld coming back. And when I did that show for the Backfield show, which you said lots of nice things about, Jeremiah. Thank you for that. It's not that I think the listener's attention span is too short to do more than 10 minutes. It's that I don't have time. That's the secret. If I did, there'd be more episodes. But with Vancouver, what moves the needle is that Gauld gets back playing. And I recorded that episode on a Tuesday morning. He comes back in the Canadian Championship and comes off the bench as Vancouver win that on Wednesday. And then he plays off the bench again on Sunday against San Jose. I didn't know when that was going to happen. Jesper Sorensen has told me and everybody else on planet Earth that Gauld was going to come back, but they didn't really seem to know when. And there have been setback after setback. And so finally he's back on the field. Now, I don't expect that he's going to start games for them between now and the end of the regular season. Maybe not even in their playoff run. Like, I don't know where his fitness is. It's clearly not at a stage where he can play 45 minutes, let alone 60 or 90. But Vancouver are in a position right now where they just need bodies and they need talented bodies. They've been ravaged at center back. Sam Adekugbe's out for the season. If memory serves, at left back. They're down Brian White up top, where he's been in and out of the lineup with injuries recently. Thomas Muller has been dealing with an adductor, and he was able to play 90 over the weekend, which is a really good sign for him. But can you really fully count on that? I'm still super high on Vancouver as a team. I still think they very much have a chance to make it to MLS Cup and to win it. But I think that they had been, and I still probably stand by this, knocked down like half a tier in the Western Conference, where I'd still have them in that top tier. But before, I think they had a really good shot to be just the straight up best team in the West. And I don't know that they had a team, maybe other than LAFC, but we need to see them play some good teams, that was right on their tails. And now I think Vancouver are kind of in that group with a number of other teams in the West.
Yeah, the West right now is pretty interesting. At the top, you have 4 teams that could finish anywhere from 1 to 4. All with pretty good point totals. Yep. I would say that they probably have 4 teams in the West that will finish on 60 points or better, which I'm pretty sure is unprecedented. I don't know that I don't certainly remember a Western. I don't know if it's happened in the East, but I'm almost positive it's never happened in the West, where you've had 4 teams. Overall, you actually might end up with a bunch of teams. You could end up with 7 teams this year that get to 60 points, which I don't know that that's ever happened before. That seems like an awful lot. But anyone in the West, Vancouver is tied on points with San Diego. They're currently losing the tiebreaker, which is wins. And they have 2 games left. San Diego only has 1. So Vancouver in pretty decent position to still finish top of the West. They could get as high as 66 points, which would be the equal to the Union, but the Union would have the tiebreaker. Anyway, for the Supporter Shield. But then you have San Diego, who's on 60 points. They have 1 game left. You have Minnesota United, who's on 58 points with 1 game left. And then you have LAFC as sort of like the meme about things in the rearview mirror are closer than they appear. They're on 56 points, but they have 3 games left to play, which I guess is sort of a double-edged sword. On one hand, there's still a lot of points. They could get to 65 points. That's still a lot of points on the board, which could push them all the way up to first. But they also have to play 3 more games at a time when a bunch of other teams only have to play 1, going right into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's so going to be a tough. Oh, sorry, Jeremiah. Go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, I said, there's no question there. The question to you was, how do you sort of handicap the top 4 of the West at this point?
So it's interesting. My thinking on the West is actually like, let's just go ahead and loop Seattle in. I know that's not where you were going, but I will, because I think they're good enough to belong there. I think it's a top 5 in the Western Conference. And if you really pressed me, I would say it actually might drop down from being a 5 to a 4, with Seattle still in the 4 and Minnesota United maybe dropping out of that group. Now, Minnesota have been a weird team all year long because they've been Set Piece FC. I think that's in their social media bio. Like, they have leaned into, under Eric Ramsey, trying to take every marginal advantage that they can find. And that's to their credit, right? Like, that's not a knock against them, but they have done that in some ways instead of becoming a really effective possession team, where they don't control the ball super well. They don't create a ton of chances from established possession, although they can from time to time. But right now, what Minnesota United are is they're hurt as well. And I don't know that they have the Vancouver level of depth to cover for things in the way that the Whitecaps have relatively successfully, although not fully successfully, because they were in the Shield race as of like 2 weeks ago, and they're not anymore because they lost it. But Minnesota, they moved Tani Oluwaseyi to Villarreal for big money. Good for them. That's how it is in MLS as an MLS team. And then Kelvin Yeboah got hurt in the Open Cup semis. So they're missing multiple pieces up top that's forced Eric Ramsey at Minnesota to completely shift his structure, where now all of a sudden, instead of being a back 3 team, he's been a back 4 team, trying to figure out who to play up top. Now, over the weekend against Sporting Kansas City in a win for Minnesota United, they started 2 attacking midfielders as their 2 strikers, in Joaquin Pereira and Robin Ludd. So Minnesota are trying to figure out where to find solid ground right now. And they may well figure that out. And they're still well talented enough to make a run all the way to MLS Cup. But Seattle, I think, just feel like so much more of a sure thing right now, where if I had to tier things in the West and you said I only get 4 teams, because it's clear there's a top 5. If I only get 4 teams, I'm dropping Minnesota out and I'm bumping Seattle into the 4.
So I guess to narrow in on my specific question, it sounds like you really have.
Yeah, I just dodged that whole thing. Yeah, wasn't that? Well, that was good of me. Huh?
No, and I appreciate you giving the Seattle love there, because I was sort of going to get there.
It's warranted. It's warranted.
No, and I think I agree with you. So you really think, as a 3-team race, it sounds like, ultimately, who do you think is going to end up with that top spot in the West, if you had to guess, between LAFC, San Diego, and Vancouver? Because that is sort of that really feels like the race, right?
Yeah, no, it very much does. And that Vancouver and LAFC both have games at hand, as you've detailed, makes things a little complicated. Honestly, if I really had to pick a team here, I would probably lean LAFC, even with the fact that they have extra games to play. They have 3, Vancouver have 2, San Diego have 1, just because they don't have anybody to play. Like, they play Toronto, they play Austin and Colorado. None of those teams are any good, right? I mean, like none of even if you rotate for some of those games, and I expect that Cherundolo would to an extent, none of those teams are very good. Now, San Diego have Portland. I don't think Portland are any good either, but it's away from home. And Vancouver, they've got, I think, the toughest of these schedules, where they've got Orlando away and FC Dallas at home. And Dallas all of a sudden have become a team that nobody really wants to play in the postseason because of how Eric Quill is setting them up. And maybe we'll get to that later. But I would lean LAFC, even with the fact that they have some ground to cover, just because they have smashed minnow after minnow after minnow in this run of theirs. And I don't know that that's slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, LAFC have just come on like gangbusters ever since Sun essentially got involved in this team. They're currently on a 5-game win streak. Weirdly, Atlanta was their least productive performance. I guess maybe that was because Atlanta set up in a very conservative, took a very conservative approach. They only took 3 shots, none of them from inside the box. They just were not exposing themselves, and LAFC ultimately needed a relatively late goal to pull out 3 points in that one. But again, that was Denny Bwanga scoring yet again. I believe that is now 18 goals between him and Sun over the last 5 games. All 18 goals they've scored, I believe, still, right? That's still right?
Yeah, so they've scored, yes. Sun and Bwanga have scored 18 goals. It's more than 5 games. I think it's taken them 7, if memory serves, to get to that point. Let me do the math. 12, 4, yeah, I believe it's 7 games. Over the last 7 games, they've scored all the goals for LAFC.
Right.
And that's fine. Like, they can totally ride with that. So the streak there is insane, Jeremiah.
So does that give you any pause in terms of, like, look, this is an amazing thing to watch. I think we can say that this is the most impressive run that any two, like, they are on an unbelievable heater. And I think you can argue that it's not even a heater, that this might just kind of be their level. But there does something to be like an X factor here, that you go into the playoffs and you'd like to have something else in your bag, even though, you know, when you're that good, when your driver is that good, sure, hit it off the deck. That's, you know, if we're going to use the golf analogy, right? Maybe you just hit driver all the time, but you do need like some short irons every now and then, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, yes, sort of. But I feel like we always move the goalposts on these sorts of discussions, right? I think about, what was that, maybe 20? It was a few years back where the Rapids had a really good season. I think they finished second in the Western Conference. I can't remember what year that was. And the big question about them heading into the postseason, where they didn't make a deep run, was do they have a primary goal scorer? And then you've got one primary goal scorer, and we think, well, is that enough? Do you need 2? And then LAFC have 2 primary goal scorers, and the question is, well, do they need 3? I don't think so. I think LAFC are going to be just fine in the attack. My question about LAFC heading into the playoffs, and the reason why sort of like danced around some of your questions and really don't have a answer that I feel super convinced on for the question you asked about who's going to win the West in the regular season anyway, it's because as I think about LAFC and not just the regular season, but beyond that, and I think about what their playoff hopes could look like, they just haven't played anybody good since Sun got there. Now, that's a bit of hyperbole. They actually have, I think, played 3 pretty good to actually quite good teams. They had San Diego, where they lost that game, but played pretty well. They lost that game 2-1. They had the draw in Chicago, and that's when Sun made his debut. So maybe we throw that one out, or you can toss it in, whatever. Sun doesn't play that whole game, doesn't start that game. And then they've got a game away in Dallas, in Frisco, and they don't win that game either. I think they draw that game. So they had 3 cracks at like decent teams, like teams that are going to be in the playoffs, certainly. And they haven't won any of those games. And the games they have won have been against like truly poor teams, where I think about beating San Jose 4-2. They put up 4 goals on RSL in back-to-back games and then 3 on St. Louis. And then they beat Atlanta over the weekend. I want to see LAFC play somebody before I feel really strongly about their chances. I still think this team is really, really good. And that's why I am still so bullish on them, even with that lack of success against good teams since Son has arrived. And I look at this team, and I think John Thornton gets a ton of credit in general around the league. Certainly in the media, I think he gets a lot of credit among people that are inside of MLS as well and in those circles. Somehow it's not enough, man. Like John Thornton and Neil McGuinness and the rest of that front office there, they have adapted this squad so effectively from one window to the next, one injury to the next. I mean, they have, Jeremiah, they're missing 2 players right now, 2 starters, the season-ending injuries. They're starting number 6, and they're probably their best center back in Aaron Long, although I'm not like as big of an Aaron Long guy as some, but that's a big deal. And I'm talking about Vancouver and Columbus and Minnesota and all these injury problems and how that could affect their seasons. Nobody talks about that with LAFC. That hasn't even been a point of discussion, because they have built such what seems to be such an effective, deep squad, frankly, that I don't know outside of Seattle that there's another team in MLS that has quite as much depth that you feel really good about playing in a big moment as LAFC. So I'm not worried about them, although I am like 3% worried that when they meet a good team or a series of good teams in the postseason, that they might just not know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, I think that is, I think you're right. Like, this is a very, very good team. And it is kind of an interesting little note that these top teams in the West all seem to be missing really important key parts. The Sounders have been are currently missing Yeimar Gomez-Andrade. They have missed, Jordan Morris has been in and out of the lineup. Basically every key piece that almost every key piece the Sounders have missed some part of the season, and you can kind of just go down the list, and everybody is sort of dealing with this to varying degrees. And it is kind of a fascinating thing to see how that ends up ultimately impacting the way the season plays out. San Diego FC, I think you've written a lot about San Diego FC. I think that by any metric, any reasonable metric, this has to be considered an almost wildly in literally unprecedented level of success that they've enjoyed in their expansion season. And I think it was you who said something along the lines like, maybe we need to change the way we look at these expansion teams, that it's not that we sort of assume that the expansion team build is inherently difficult. But I think I'm pretty sure this was you that I heard talking about this.
I was on Soccer Wise with Tom. Yeah.
Okay. And you were talking about how they actually have some advantages, and building from scratch is sometimes better than having to rebuild a team that has all these existing, if you do it right, there's some inherent advantages. And San Diego seems to have really exploited all those advantages, especially in that they had this very clear vision of what they wanted to do, and they just didn't deviate from that. And I think you can maybe argue that maybe bites them in the ass a little bit when they let Ilosky leave, because they sort of were saying, look, we're not going to, we have other ideas for what we want to do at this position, and he just doesn't fit it. And even if it's a relatively cheap price, we're not going to bring him back. But it is kind of funny to think in terms of this year, they'd be much better off if they kept him, right? I mean, that's undeniable, right?
Yeah, no doubt about that. And the situation was, I'm sure many listeners know, that Ilosky wanted a raise to stay around in San Diego, and Tyler Heaps in that front office decided that they didn't want to give him the raise that he wanted, and so he goes off to Philly, and Philly signed him, which is kind of funny to all of us because Ernst Tanner doesn't spend a lot of money on players.
So we know it wasn't a lot of money.
Exactly. So it's not like a top of the market sort of rate that Milan Ilosky's getting, but it still sounds like it's more than Tyler Heaps in that front office wanted to pay. And in some ways, I feel for Heaps because the sample size was basically 0 for Ilosky, right? I mean, he scored double-digit goals in 500 minutes or something absurd. And you think that can't continue. And it hasn't, but it hasn't not continued by very much. I mean, he has still been amazing for Philly and is now playing a key role for them in a different position and very much seems to be a very good MLS player. So they've got to be feeling that one a little bit. But man, what is that? The only thing they've done wrong? all season
Right.
long. I mean,
Right.
it is so impressive what they've done. San Diego took advantage of every edge that they get, and I think we all underestimated what this team was going to look like by a lot.
Oh.
I think I had them just inside the playoffs in the Western Conference in my preseason predictions, thinking that they had a lot of pieces that I really liked. Both the DPs looked really good, and Dreyer and Lozano. Luca De La Torre was a basically can't miss MLS center mid. Anibal Godoy is a capable player in midfield. Jeppe Terskov looked pretty good. My concern was about the back line. And that is something that has chopped and changed quite a bit this season, but I didn't expect their top super draft pick, Emmanuel Dua, to suddenly become one of the flashiest center backs in Major League Soccer. I didn't expect Chris McVeigh to look like a very capable center back, although neither of those guys were perfect against the Dynamo over the weekend. I didn't expect them to pluck Luca Malbito out of relative obscurity in LAFC, and now he's at the U20 World Cup. I mean, like, there's just so many of those things that I didn't see coming, that I don't think anybody saw coming. They're the best expansion team in MLS regular season history. I think you could make an argument that in like factoring in all the eras, they might already be the best expansion team in MLS history. I know that takes some shots at the 1998 Chicago Fire, who do end up going and doing the double that year. They win MLS Cup, they win the Open Cup. It's a very different time, and I think succeeding in MLS now in some ways is harder now than it was then. Take it, man.
I feel like it's hard to compare anything to 90.
It is.
I mean, and you sort of mentioned this on the show with Tom, that it's just hard to call that an expansion team when the entire league was effectively
like 3 years
an expansion
old,
team.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
100%.
come into year 3, so it's like, okay, yes, they are technically the best expansion team. They'll probably never be topped if you use them as the bar. But in the modern era of MLS, I think it's basically them, LAFC, and the Sounders in terms of the best debuts. The Sounders are the only one that actually won a trophy their first year, but you know, and I will say the Sounders were sneakily close to winning the Supporters Shield that year. I think they lost out by just a point or two, but the point totals were also way low. Like, it wasn't even on a points per game basis. It was just a much tighter rate. Like, it was not the same thing. I feel okay saying San Diego this has been the most impressive. Certainly, since I've been paying attention, this has been the most impressive expansion.
It's been amazing to watch, man. Like, they deserve so much credit for everything that has gone on there. I mean, Dreyer, if Lionel Messi's not in the league, Dreyer probably wins MVP this year. If Jesper Sorensen is not doing what's happening in Vancouver, then Mikey Varas probably wins Coach of the Year. At the very least, he's in the discussion. And he'll probably get a lot of votes, Mikey Varas. I think my vote probably tends to push toward Sorensen, but I haven't fully made up my mind on that yet, and I'm willing to be swayed. I mean, there's just so much to like about this San Diego team. They found talent from places that we didn't think they would. Their style has been on point from the jump, in that not style. People talk about this all the time, and sometimes it frustrates me. Style is not something that you want to have just to say that you can play this like romantic whatever version of soccer that we've philosophized this sport over time. I don't even know if that's a word. It sounded good when I said it though. Like we've like romanticized. There's a better one. That's a real word for sure. This game, because we just have over time, and it's played everywhere, and it has that quality to it. And so people talk about style like that's all that matters on its own. Well, style is a means to an end. And the end of having a style that everybody understands on your team how to execute is that everybody's on the same page. And when you know what I'm going to do as a podcast guest, and when you know what my next move is going to be, that allows you to plan the next question better. And all these things, right? If you're on a soccer team and you can make quicker decisions, that's going to make life harder for the defense. And when you can make quicker pressing decisions, that's going to make life harder for the opposing attack. It is a means to an end, and San Diego have reached that end. Now, they still have some rough edges in that they are, at times, as a consequence to how they want to play, still a little loose on the ball, and they give up the ball in bad spots. That certainly happened against Houston. I don't know. I don't believe that they have the defensive chops that Seattle or Vancouver or LAFC or Philly or maybe even a couple of other teams, Nashville in the East, maybe NYCFC have. I think they're very much in that next tier or two down from those groups. There's just so little to nitpick with San Diego in the short term, and frankly, even less to nitpick in the long term.
Yeah, and I think where I come down on them is they could finish. I guess they could still technically finish fourth, but they could have finished fourth, fifth, even sixth. And I think if you take everything else that they've done, it would still be an impressive launch, because they just have, like you said, they've had this commitment to playing a certain way that is effective. And that is really what it's about. It's not, can you string a bunch of passes together? It's, can you play with a real focus that is clearly building towards something? am very interested to see how this plays in the playoffs. I realize it's the playoffs they're different. They just are different. It's harder. It's you just don't find as much space, and teams are approaching these things differently, especially the 3-game series where you have to play the same opponent back to back, but potentially. Sure. And it's going to be just interesting to see how this plays out. But either way, it's just been very, very impressive to see what they've done, to see how they've handled themselves against the LAFCs, who they've matched up really well with. But yeah, I just keep coming away just ultimately very impressed. I've been saying this for a while. I do think a long playoff run for an expansion team can sometimes be a double-edged sword, in that you set this bar that ends up being almost impossible to clear. Like, it's nice to have something to build off of and to build from. Like, if all you can do is win Champions League in order to improve on their previous season, or win MLS Cup to improve on your previous season.
One to clear.
Yeah, right. And I think we saw this kind of with Atlanta too, right? Where they won MLS Cup in year 2, and it's almost been sort of like this yoke around their neck in terms of, well, this is now our standard. So everything we do has to be compared to this amazing, 2018 season that frankly might never be equaled.
What I will say on that is, I mean, odds are against San Diego having this season that they've had this year next year, right? I mean, odds are that they'll do worse, is a simpler way of saying that. At the same time, I am really bullish on the long term for this team, because their academy has just started. They've already shown an unbelievable ability, the entire front office, to go out and sign youth national team level players from all sorts of places. Like the fact that Heaps and Varas both have U.S. soccer connections from time at the Federation, I think really matters. Varas is a former U20 coach. I mean, they go out and grab Pedro Soma from Spain, and they go out and grab this right back, whose last name starts with an H, and I don't know how to pronounce it. He started over the weekend, and he's played a bunch of minutes for them this season, at least relative to expectation. They plucked him out of like the youth levels over in Germany. He's a U.S. youth international. Luca Bombino, I already mentioned. David Vasquez from Philly. Like, the list goes on and on of these guys that they've given real minutes to, who weren't even on the roster when the season started. That's Oscar Verhoeven's been out injured, but they got him from San Jose. I mean, it goes on and on. When they actually start churning out their own players from their own academy, which is in a great area, by the way, to all of the players that they've already got and shown an ability to go out and find, I'm really high on what the future could be like for them. Yes, there'll be a dip. Fans have to be rational. We know fans aren't very good at doing that. So that is what it is. But the other thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned what this looks like in the playoffs, in the short term, I tend to think that people make a little too much of, well, this style doesn't tend to work in the postseason, or that style doesn't tend to work in the postseason. And this is done with zero, I want to emphasize, zero statistical searching on my part. But I know Doyle talks about all the time, like we've seen the Red Bulls playoff streak shows that they can't go and win in the postseason with a high pressing model. And my sort of thought on that is, well, Philly high pressed a bunch in 2022 and were like one kick of the ball away from winning MLS Cup. And they almost won the double that year. Like, they were a really good team. And at a certain point, variance kind of plays its part. For San Diego, I don't think they should be worried about how their style translates in the postseason, because who have the last 2 MLS Cup winners been? Well, last year it was the LA Galaxy, who exclusively used the ball up until they lost Ricky Puig. And the year before it was Wilfred Nance's Columbus Crew, who used the ball more than basically any team we'd ever seen in MLS until San Diego came along. So I think they have every chance to make a deep run in the postseason. Again, I think the top of the West is so incredibly difficult to call. I do not think there's almost anything that separates basically any of those top 5 teams. I think San Diego very much have a shot to win it.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart podcast network, which now includes No Sarietes, Loving Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line again to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. Nos Odietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Well, let's dig into this top 5 notion a little bit. I tend to agree with you. I feel like the Sounders, if nothing else, I think they showed what their ceiling can be when they won Leagues Cup. I mean, it was clearly like this is a team when they're playing well, they can play with anybody. Now, we saw the last 4 or 5 games where they have struggled a bit more to close out teams, especially. I don't think they've necessarily been bad in most of those games, but they do seem to have a tendency to give up late, to make mistakes late in games that are a little baffling. But I still do tend to believe that this defense is good, even though it's essentially the same defense that was the top defense in MLS by both the real numbers and the underlying numbers. Each of the last 2 seasons, the underlying numbers still say that they are a very good defensive team. And for whatever reason, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot, whether it be, red cards like they picked up against Portland or penalties. Penalties and red cards have just been this constant for the Sounders this year that sort of baffles. It's been a little baffling for me as someone who's watching it. But as an outside, I'm looking at this every day, but as an outsider, what do you clearly like something that you're seeing with the Sounders that wants you to raise them into sort of, like kind of this elite level of the Western Conference?
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that you phrased that, Jeremiah, of we've seen what their ceiling is. I think that their ceiling is crazy high, and we saw how good they were in Leagues Cup final against Inter Miami. I mean, they were awesome in that game. It wasn't maybe the scoreline flattered them slightly because Miami did have some looks in that game, but they were really good, like really, really good in that game. We saw how they can play up to the level at the Club World Cup, and that didn't go maybe how they would have wanted, but still a very respectable outing from the team in that instance. Yeah. I'm basically willing to chuck everything from the Leagues Cup final until the end of the regular season out if that's what someone wants to do. For Seattle, like the emotional energy that went into that game seemed to be really great. And maybe there's a learning experience there for, hey, you got to get up, but also we're not done. Like this is not our final. It's just a final. That's a hard line to straddle, man. Like I don't know how to teach people that. I don't know how to manage that on my own, let alone communicate it to others in that situation. But I am willing to chuck the rest of the regular season out and believe in this group that they know how to get up for the games when they matter. I think we have enough evidence of this club and a lot of these players that says they can do that. And even beyond that, they have not been nearly as bad as the results between the Leagues Cup final and finally this win over Portland that gets the monkey off the back, right? They have not been nearly as bad as those results have shown. They have made mistakes. Everybody in MLS makes mistakes. A lot of them. Every team. It is a little, again, there's a little variance in when those mistakes get punished and when they don't. Against the Galaxy, they got punished. Smetzer was displeased with some setups off of defensive throw-ins after that game. And there have been all those little details that maybe, again, haven't been quite right after you burn so much emotional energy in the final. The other thing besides the ceiling for Seattle that seems so incredibly high, that is incredibly high. It's as high as any team in MLS, I think. The other thing is that they just have so many stinking good players. Like ultimately, the roster is so absurdly deep that you can go and, you're missing Obed Vargas, who's been really, really good in MLS this year. Yeah, no problem. Like Rusnak has played in the 8 before a bunch of times. He can go and start there. The red card was unfortunate, whatever, right? I mean, like, oh yeah, great. Yeah. Latte Zeus played the 10 and Pedro's better this year than he's ever been. He'll be on the left. I think in some ways this team just looks better this year than it did last year to me. And we haven't seen the full group of this team all year long. but there's way too much talent in here, and we've seen way too many good moments from them to make me think that this team is anything but a top tier contender in the West.
Yeah, the thing I like about this team is, last year, the thing that was holding them back was an offense that was really never got fully going. They got okay on set pieces, but from open play, they were struggling from the beginning of the season all the way to the end. And this year, they've turned it around, and they've actually been one of the better teams in open play. Looking not at set pieces and penalties, I think the Sounders are 5th or 6th in both the underlying numbers and the real numbers in terms of goal scoring. Which and that's come from a variety of places. You've got Danny Masovsky banging in goals for fun. You got Osaze de Rosario. You've got, and that doesn't even include the Leagues Cup, and where they really showed off their depth, I thought, in Leagues Cup. But I'm with you. I do like this team. I think that if they can, if they can get healthy and get some rhythm going, they could be dangerous. And it seems like they have, it looks to me like they are on sort of a collision course with Minnesota United, a team that's beaten them twice this year, but I would say maybe less than convincingly beaten them in both of those games. How do you see a matchup? Like, are you convinced that Minnesota United can keep doing this thing that they do? I know they actually, they looked okay again. I'm sorry, they dominated Sporting Kansas City, but Sporting Kansas City is about as dead as they can be.
Yeah, that's well said. First of all, Seattle should be hoping that they're on a collision course for Minnesota instead of LAFC, I think. And from what we said, I think we both expect LAFC to climb a little bit, right? For everything I said about LAFC about being 3% worried that they'll hit a good team and not know what to do, there's maybe a bigger chunk of me that thinks when they hit a good team and the game opens up a little bit, and Seattle might not be the right team for that to actually happen against, given how Smetzer likes to be pragmatic in those moments. Man, when LAFC hit a team that's willing to give them some space, I might suggest running for the hills and hoping that works out for you along the way. For Minnesota, team. It's a scary team. For Minnesota, I don't know what to make of this team, man. I have to hedge towards I'm worried about them because I think it would be foolish not to be a little bit worried about where they're at the moment. But I think the set piece stuff can continue even without Oluwaseyi and even without Yeboah. And we don't know for sure that Yeboah is done for the year, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to play a huge role. Maybe caveat that. I don't know exactly what's going to happen there. I think the set piece stuff can continue. They are so incredibly good at that. I am worried about this team losing a little bit of their ceiling defensively, that they won't be able to press as effectively from the front. It's not that they're an all-out pressing team in every moment, but they press a lot in the final third, and they sit really deep in other moments. And when they press, I think they are, and Eric Ramsey's talked about this, they have not seen as much success in the press since they have had to reshuffle the attacking personnel due to injuries and Oluwaseyi leaving. And then when they do sit deeper, now they cannot transition nearly as effectively because they've lost their two best transition attackers, right? In Yeboah and Oluwaseyi, especially Oluwaseyi. I mean, he was the best attacker in this team. Pereira and Lod are very good players. Bongi Huanglane is a very effective transition player for an outside back, but now he's maybe being asked to play higher up the field or to play more centrally if that's the look in any given game. They're just not as good of a team now as they were before. The MLS playoffs are not so long that variance could not get them all the way to the final, and their very specific skills are very real and could indeed get them there. But again, I think what I said earlier sums it up well in that I think of the 5 teams, I think they're number 5.
This is sort of separate question, but one of the things that I've always found very interesting is there's this sort of insistence that Eric Ramsey is this hot coaching commodity, and I'm sure he is, but I am curious, like, do people in England really just are they in love with the idea of a guy who sets his team up to have 30% of possession and try to score some goals on 70? Like, I guess maybe that's useful for a relegation fight, but that does not strike me as sort of like the coaching genius that gets you moved up in the world. There's a world for, a lot of pragmatic coaches have gotten a lot of juice out of it, but this, I always question the idea that this is like some exciting coaching prospect. It's like, he figured out a thing, but is this what gets you the next job? I don't know.
Well, and the crazy thing is he's figured out a thing and it's worked all year. So, I mean, maybe we do need to give a little bit more credit to what that looks like because nobody's been able to stop it. I think there's a line in here somewhere about how dire lower level English soccer is to watch that Ramsey's style would fit right in. I mean, it's bad, man. I also think the fact that he was at Manchester United matters a lot to a lot of these clubs. And I mean, his profile, pretend you've never watched Minnesota United play soccer under Eric Ramsey. Yeah. His profile of young, well-spoken, sort of dynamic personality who speaks multiple languages, came up in the Manchester United system, like kind of right before things were getting dumpster fiery there, and then moves to America, which like to all these English people was like, wow, that's a bit beneath you, but like he's had a lot of success and dominated there, and so that's got like a lot of appeal, and I think he does start to look like a pretty nice candidate for a lot of these jobs. And the interesting thing is, I've never spoken to Eric Ramsey. I don't get the sense that this is like his way of playing. I get the sense, and I'm hoping to have more about this at Backheeled later in the year. I get the sense that this is probably coming part from Ramsey and part from upstairs, and it's been working, and they've decided we got to make this our thing and just absolutely ride it out. And I give him credit for that. I think Ramsey probably would tend to be a bit more possession-y than we've seen. Not a lot, but at least some. But that's certainly not going to happen this year.
So kind of a Moneyball approach, which is not so much that there's a specific philosophy, but there is a finding the undervalued asset or the overlooked advantages that you can gain and maximizing on those no matter what those may be. And if it happens to lead you to long throws and 30% of possession, so be it.
Right. And Ramsey, I think talked to John Muller of The Guardian earlier this year and basically said, if we didn't go long on every set piece, like every set piece they get near midfield, Dane St. Clair trots up and just smashes it into the 18. If they didn't do all that stuff, because time's ticking off the clock there, they would have, I think he said 10% more possession per game. I think that's way too high. But there's some truth to that, right? If they didn't go so extreme and all these things, they would have more of the ball, and maybe we would think about them in a slightly different way. But I have to imagine their effective game time, like the amount of time the ball's in play in Minnesota games, is the lowest in the league by a huge margin. And so that does kind of mess with their numbers a little bit. You look at what makes Minnesota United so special beyond all of the tactical stuff that makes them an outlier, right? Is that their recruitment's been really good as well. Like they have a lot of good players in this team, and who I think could be adaptable to play in a different way. And that's why I'm not willing to close the book on, all of a sudden they can't transition quite like they could before. Well, Robin Ludd's still a really good player. And Joaquin Pereira had suitors from Europe and was the subject of like a $8 million bid or something crazy from a club in Turkey. Like they have real talent in this team. It looks like they've hit already on at least one of the guys they brought in the summer. And they've got good production from basically every spot on the field. And oh, by the way, Dane St. Clair might be the best goalkeeper in MLS this season. So again, they're not the team that I'd be most afraid of, but doubt them and sort of rule them out, I think, at your own what am I looking for? I talk for a living. Just don't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Do something else. Nailed it. It's been a day. It's
absolutely.
Day. First try.
Yeah, Dane St. Clair, for what it's worth, Dane St. Clair, I think, is my goalkeeper of the year. Spoiler alert.
I think same.
So of the, let's call it the other 6 teams that are still competing for a playoff spot, is anyone in there notable? Like it sounded like you kind of like Dallas. You feel like Dallas might be the one, but is that the only team that you think is even really worth talking about at this point?
Peril was the word I was looking for before, by the way. So I did get there. I did get there eventually. Just a slight delay. Yeah, Dallas are the only other team that I'm even like a little scared of, and I'm not that scared of them. But what Dallas have done since Lucho Acosta left has been awesome. So they have not lost a single game since Lucho Acosta last played for them. They've gone 8 straight unbeaten.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. And Eric Quill, it's all coming too late for him to be in the Coach of the Year conversation. But Eric Quill adapting his style and saying, hey, guys, we're going to go and defend in our own third every single game. I think they had some absurdly low possession percentage in their win over the Galaxy over the weekend. I'm trying to find what it is on the fly. 37%. So in that run, thank you for finding that. That is still the 4th highest possession percentage that they've had. They've had so many games underneath 37% possession. They have basically camped out in their own third of the field
during this unbeaten streak. To be clear, what you're talking about in the 8 games that they've gone unbeaten. This was the 4th lowest, and it was at 37.
Yes, they've only had 3 games where they've had more in this run. Only 3 games where they've had more than 37% possession. Like every other game has been below that mark, 34, 35, 36, 35. They have just sat in their own third for huge chunks of matches at a time. And you know what? It's working. And it's not like, I'm not trying to say that this is some mind-boggling tactical creation from Eric Will. It's not, right? But what it's done is it's helped compensate for a roster that frankly is no good. Like the roster in Dallas is terrible. Sebastian Ibeaga, who is like barely an MLS level center back in my mind, he leads this team in minutes. Lelis Abubakar, a Colorado Rapids cast-off, is a starting center back for this team. They're starting a 19-year-old Brazilian kid that they brought in on a U22 deal, Kaique, for big money, who so far is not good. It's a good thing for him that development is not linear, and he could turn out to be a great player, but he's not there yet, certainly. He's starting for them in central midfield. It's just a bad roster. And because they sit so deep, that means they put their bad players in fewer bad spots because they're less isolated. And so they have more help as a team. They can defend as a team. And oh, by the way, when they do need to go and attack, Pitar Musa might be the best player that nobody's talking about in Major League Soccer this season, where he can go and create chances for others as a 9, but also is an unbelievable box presence and such a well-rounded player. He's been a smash hit, one of their only smash hits, Dallas, for years and years now. That recipe of sitting deep and then attacking through Musa, not a great trophy-winning recipe, but could it be a recipe for a first-round upset? Maybe, at least more than any of these other teams. That's for sure.
Yeah, 18 goal. If he wasn't, well, okay. Maybe not in the MVP consideration, but if he wasn't on such a bad team, he would probably be getting some best 11 shouts. Yeah. He might get some as it is. This is an even crazier thing. If you go back to the last time that Luciano Acosta actually played, so before he didn't play for a few games after before he actually got transferred. That was a 2-0 loss to LAFC. They've only lost once since he stopped playing. And that was a 4-3 loss to New York City FC, a wild game that they lost in New York City. So other than that, so they've just been on this really impressive run that they have undeniably gotten better once Acosta got out of the team, essentially.
Yeah, and I at least on FBref, Acosta played in that NYCFC loss. So the last, at least what I'm looking at is since he stopped playing for them in any capacity, not just starting, in any capacity, they have not lost a game. And that may happen sooner rather than later. They've got the Galaxy up next, which is a winnable game. And they got Vancouver on decision day. But the overall here is impressive, and it gives them a blueprint for next season. Whether or not the front office can land the targets needed to make this setup work, or maybe Quill wants to play a different way, and this is just his break glass in case of emergency, tactical choice. All that stuff is possible. But man, it's at least made something interesting at the bottom of the West, because I know the East is all booked up in terms of playoff spots. There's room for some shuffling there. The West has some wiggle room at the bottom, but I just find it difficult to get excited about any of these other teams making the postseason. I mean, just watching RSL and Colorado try to make their way in San Jose, I guess they're still involved in this fight. I just am not moved by any of those teams at the moment, but Dallas, at least a little bit, they kind of move me right now.
I mean, they could jump to 6. I mean, that's not outside of the realm of possibility that they could get as high as 6. So they're currently 8th right now. They can, I guess they still haven't technically punched their ticket, but they have
but they're
2
close.
games left. Yeah, I think they need 1 point. Yeah, it looks like they probably need, they probably need 2 points. But either way. All right. Well, before we get out of here, do you want to go through some of your thinking on the ballot for end of season awards? Just got given to us last week. I have not cast it yet. Just actually before we got on, I started going through it to see where I was. And so far it seems, I'm right now, I'm on Defender of the Year, just to give you an update on where I am. So I'm still on the first page. I think I'm still on the first page of voting. But so far it seems pretty straightforward. I'll tell you where I am. Newcomer of the Year feels like it's got to be Dreyer, right? Like he would be an MVP candidate if it wasn't for Messi, who I think is probably going to end up winning MVP. But 17 goals, 16 primary assists. This is a spectacular. This is like a great season by any metric. It's a frankly unbelievable season, especially for an expansion team.
Yeah, very much so. Dreyer is, I think there are 2 that are really easy this year. MVP and Newcomer of the Year, I think, are pretty easy choices. And Dreyer is the obvious newcomer, and he would be the MVP if Messi wasn't here in my mind. I think if you take Messi out of Miami, that team is like maybe not even a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. Like he has been.
It seemed like a disaster to me without Messi.
Yeah. I completely agree. He in like every definition, we go through all these different definitions of MVP and how do you decide? What does it actually mean? Well, you got to take the player out of the team and think about how they would do, or no, you don't have to. I mean, there's so many different ways that people twist themselves up in knots about this. Miami are a good team. They've got a chance to win MLS Cup. Messi's amazing. He's the most talented player in the league for one. And he's probably the most valuable if you want to use that very strict definition as well.
He also has 24 goals and 14 assists in 2,200 minutes. So like he's doing the business no matter how we don't need to overthink this. He is having a absolutely unbelievable season. He has more goals and assists combined. He has 5 more goals and assists combined than anyone else in the league right now. And Dreyer is the only one that is even sniffing him. That said, let's see where we. So I was actually pleased. I don't know how long they've been doing this, but comeback player of the year. They seem to have narrowed down the qualifications for comeback player of the year. There's only I think there's only 8 players that are even nominated this year, which I find frankly refreshing because it used to be that comeback player of the year could be coming back from anything you wanted. Bad season, hangnail, but all these players came back from apparently pretty serious injury, and they could, okay. And honestly, I found this one tough in part because they narrowed it down so much that there weren't a lot of obvious candidates. But Danielle, the quarterback, the goalkeeper for the Earthquakes is who I have right now. But the other ones that are nominated are Connor Antley, Kyle Duncan from DC United, Kyle Duncan from the Red Bulls, Lawrence Anali from Houston, Nick Hagelin from Cincinnati, Pablo Ruiz from RSL, and Richie Larea from Toronto FC.
Yeah, it's not like the most inspiring group of players based off of total talent. I think Daniel's a very fine choice. This is the first time I've even cracked open my ballot because I just said I'll look at it after the season actually ends. I think yes, I'm allowed to do that. I think we can make it through decision day and go through it that way.
Absolutely.
I completely forgot this award existed. I think it kind of has to be between Daniel, Haglund, Larea, and Inali. Probably is one of those guys.
Yeah.
Larea has still not played a ton this year. I honestly cannot remember what his injury was before. Shame on me. But we'll see. I think Daniel's the one who's been regularly starting out of all these guys and been playing at a fairly high level. He seems like the sensible choice.
And then young player of the year, Diego Luna is who I have. It seems like Obed Vargas is nominated. There's a few other, Jack McGlynn is nominated. There's a few other kind of notable players, but Diego Luna feels like to me the one who fits best. And I even say that as a Obed Vargas truther.
I think I had Obed as my top 22 under 22 player. Now Luna, I don't believe was eligible for this year's 22 under 22 list. Finn Sermon also, by the way, not eligible. The Portland Timbers center back. Keith Costigan mentioned on the broadcast of the Sounders Timbers game this past week that Phil Neville had gotten in the mentions of I think he said prominent MLS journalist, which is a very kind way to refer to me because Phil Neville's up in my X mentions whining about Finn Sermon not being on the list. I can't vote for Finn Sermon. He's too old, bro. It's not my fault. Finn Sermon's a very good center back. I'm probably one of the 5 people on the planet this year outside of the city of Portland who's praised Finn Sermon, and you're yelling at me, bro. It's not my fault. I didn't make the rules. Anyway, I don't think Diego Luna is eligible for 22 under 22, but I think he's a very reasonable choice for young player of the year. The other ones that would tempt me, because I haven't decided yet, the other ones that really tempt me would be Vargas and Alex Freeman. I think unless I can think of somebody that I'm obviously missing. Olefu Makanya has been really good at center back for the Union. There's a few other of these guys that I think have shouts here, but Luna is a fine choice as always for most things in life, I think.
Yeah. And then goalkeeper of the year, I think we already talked about this, but I think Dane St. Clair kind of does it for me. I did think it was an interesting little note. Why am I blanking on the Colorado Rapids coach's name?
Chris Armas.
Chris Armas said that Stefan underlying numbers say he's the best goalkeeper in the year. And I was like, oh, is that true? I know historically that's definitely not the case. And I know he started the year very well. He is nowhere near the best under. He's
Correct.
like mid. He's like what are you talking? This is like when you hear coaches talking about, the underlying numbers say we're the best team in MLS, and you go look it up, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, no, what underlying numbers are you referring to?
They got their own system in Colorado. They're tracking things in the
internal
Rapids
polling.
way. Yeah, exactly. Yikes.
And then we won't go through this whole list, but I don't know. Do you have a favorite? I think we were also talking about how Defender of the Year still feels kind of up for it. You said MVP is sort of is Messi, like kind of easy. Any other awards that you feel like you are, or who's in? Do you have a best? Who's in your best 11 right now? I guess that's what we'll go with this next.
Yeah, let me rattle off some names because I haven't constructed this full thing, but I think St. Clair would be in goal at center back, and I'm sort of thinking through a lot of these guys across the back line as potential Defender of the Year candidates. I think you're looking at some combination of Tristan Blackman, Jakub Glesnes, and Jackson Reagan potentially, unless there's like an outside contender there that I haven't thought about quite enough. But I'm guessing I'm going to pick between those three guys for two spots because I'm a best 11 should be sort of reasonable soccer lineups kind of guy. So I'm not just tossing forwards. 3 center backs and I'm not doing that. That ain't gonna happen. So I'm open to two of those guys being in the middle of my back four. Kai Wagner is the obvious left back pick, and he's a guy who I'm still tempted by for a Defender of the Year, by the way. I know that he wouldn't win it based off of his defensive chops. I don't know how we're supposed to vote about that. Nobody ever votes for fullbacks for those things. So I feel like I shouldn't either. But is that herd mentality? Should I be different, Jeremiah? I don't know what to do with that. That's
for Defender of the Year, you're saying, or for
for Defender of the Year, because Kai Wagner has been amazing this year.
Well, I know a couple years ago that was sort of when Philadelphia was destroying teams 6-0 every game. Sure. I feel like that year Kai Wagner was getting a lot of discussion at least, and I think Glesnes ended up winning that year. So it was sort of maybe it was ended up being kind of a moot point. But I feel like for Defender of the Year, they should be a defender first, even though fullbacks get kind of screwed, kind of in the same way that defensive midfielders get. Like I feel like a defensive midfielder deserves to be considered for Defender of the Year, although I don't even think they're eligible for Defender of the Year.
So you're saying it's like a fact of life, sort of like it's
a fact of life.
That's just how it is.
It's like,
all right.
Right. Like it's the same thing, back in the baseball, when I was really into baseball, there was always this debate where their pitchers should even be eligible for MVP because they have the Cy Young. Why should they be eligible for MVP? They only play every 4 days or whatever it was. But yeah, I just kind of feel like there's some things that are facts of life. Pitchers should be considered for MVP, and center backs are your Defender of the Year. That's just unfortunately the way it is. But where I think it really where fullbacks get really screwed is in best 11, because the temptation is always to just list a bunch of center backs as your best 11. And then oftentimes we won't have any fullbacks or sometimes even any defensive midfielders in the best 11, which to me is silly. Like, what are we like? And I guess that gets to what is the point of a best 11? But I do feel like there should be at least one fullback and at least one defensive midfielder in anyone's best 11.
I completely agree. I mean, I think frankly that you should always have 2 fullbacks and 2 center backs until teams just stop using back 4 setups, because you don't get the fullbacks to get love any other way. I think that's pretty much the only way, as you said, that actually can happen. I'm very satisfied by that Defensive Player of the Year explanation. I think you've just fully swayed me away from Kai Wagner.
Oh, good.
You just shouldn't play fullback. That's you did this to yourself when you decided to play that position and didn't forfeit when your coach continued to put you there. I think that's just how it is.
This is the cost.
At right back, Wagner's the left back in my best 11. At right back, it's either Alex Freeman or Andy Nahar. Haven't decided yet. Jeppe Terskov is at the base of my midfield. Christian Roldan is almost certainly in my midfield, although I reserve the right to change that. Evander is probably my attacking midfielder. And then in my front 3, I've got Messi, Dreyer, maybe Bouanga, maybe Surridge. Probably Surridge, and Bouanga ends up missing out just by virtue of Messi and Dreyer existing. But I haven't decided fully.
So part of what got me thinking about this was your colleague Ben Wright actually tweeted out a image of what he thought would be his best 11, like without going through the actual ballot. And he noted that his perfectly reasonable best 11 was not even a possibility. And this is what got me. I haven't gotten far enough to figure out why it's not possible, but I assume it's because of the way that they assign positions to players that you couldn't have this mix. But he had like a perfectly reasonable 4-2-3-1 sort of formation that I guess is not really allowed in the way that MLS sort of assigns positions to various players.
Yeah, you only get 3 forwards, and I think Ben wanted to sneak, which seemed fair. I think he wanted to sneak Dreyer and Bouanga on the wings, Surge up top, and Messi underneath. And all those guys are listed as forwards in the roster. And so I think he's a bit perturbed by that, which is fair enough, actually. Like, I was kind of razzing him a little bit because I'd seen this and he and I were chatting about it a little bit. I was razzing him before I saw what the lineup was, and he was whining about not being able to put 4 forwards in the team. And I was thinking, well, dude, my whole thing is that it's got to be a reasonable lineup. Right. And then he sent it to me, and I had to apologize. Lineup. I think it's reasonable. It's probably still a little light defensively to get away with in some respects, but that team would be reasonable, perfectly reasonable for a best 11. Give us more freedom, MLS. Please.
Yeah, I think the real trick there is that they have Dreyer and Messi both listed as forwards, who I think you could argue are, in the modern way that we use midfielders, sort of like could be, it's like on paper you could see Messi being, Messi feels like a 10. Anyway, we don't need to get too deep into that. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Joe. I think that this is going to be a fascinating season. I know that the conversation out there is that the East is this powerhouse and the West is sort of just like this scrappy bunch of underdogs. But I don't know that that's really how this is going to play out. I feel like the top 4 or 5 teams in the West can hang with the top, whoever comes out. The reality is that it's not, that's not what, like, it's going to end up being one of the top teams from the West and one of the top teams from the East. And they're probably going to match up pretty well. Yep.
I completely agree. Like, I think the framing is wrong. And the nuance is, the East is crazy deep, like probably historically deep this year. Like 1 through 9 are all teams that, frankly, even Chicago, like they're at their best, they're scary. So the East is deep and talented at the top. The West is not deep, no depth in the West after the first 5 teams. But the first 5 teams are every bit good enough to win MLS Cup. So there is, once we get past round 1 of the playoffs, it's going to be exclusively like very good teams remaining. Barring some upset out West.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The East is. I would be actually curious. I would imagine that the team that misses the playoff, like the 10th place team in the East, will almost certainly have the most points of any 10th place team in MLS history.
Yeah. I haven't looked at it, but that has to be right. That has to be
right. Like I haven't looked at it either, but I just feel like that's almost a given. Right now, the 10th place team in the East is the Red Bulls at 43 points. Maybe doesn't sound that
ninth.
Low, but
maybe it's 9th and
but ninth. But the Crew are 9th with 51 points. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
The Crew not been at their best. I know you were trying to decrescendo this thing. The Crew could win MLS Cup. Like I'm not backing down from that. They got Rossi and Zawadzki back over the weekend. Defensively, they've not been as good, but Zawadzki gives them a little bit more there. Even in their still semi-banged up form, I'm not ready to count the Crew out of winning this thing. So it is, the East is insane in how it is structured, but the top of the West is every bit toe-to-toe with the top of the East.
I agree. But that's probably a good place to call this. But that said, backheel.com, I want to just put this pitch out again. It's obviously subscribe to backheel.com, but if you want to do a double dip thing, you can become an advocate or above on Sounder at Heart, and that includes a membership at Backheeled. We have to, just to give you a heads up, we have to manually do this, so give us a little bit of time. But it's worked out so far. I think we have a few dozen people that have picked this up, and it seems like it's been a nice little partnership. It's been great sharing with you. We are going to do hopefully more stuff as we get into the playoffs. We tried something a couple weeks ago. You guys had this really great Christian Roldan. Was it Christian Roldan or Obed Vargas? Christian Roldan story, right?
Yeah. I think the one I'm thinking of that we sort of did a little content share was look at the best defenses in MLS. At least that's the one that I'm thinking of at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it was. But I really like being able to do this kind of stuff where we give sort of like a teaser and say, go finish reading this on Backheeled and become a subscriber. I think you guys do great work there. You've got in some really talented people to help write there. I think the world of what I love right now about the state of soccer media is that there's always really interesting independent voices, and you are right there at the top. So I just want to give another plug to backheel.com. And of course your podcast, which, doesn't take a lot of your time.
I mean, that's pretty much the whole pitch, man. What you said earlier was just like so nice and like so much more generous in the podcast. I think you said gives you really helpful insights for your daily life. And that's just not true. But you know, if you want to listen to a podcast about soccer for 10 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you absolutely can, darn it.
I mean, there's worse ways. There's a lot of worse ways to spend 10 minutes on your walk.
That's a great point. That's the new, I'm going to update that subscription, that description right now. Nailed it. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Joe. Obviously, you follow Joe on Blue Sky as well. And I think you probably got one of those fancy blue check marks by now, I'm guessing.
I did. It turns out all you have to do is apply for it. I
did the same thing.
So it's there. It's fancy and it's blue. So everything blue? You said is just 100% correct.
Absolutely.
At Joe C. Lowry on Blue Sky.
Thank you. I was kind of filibustering there because I was like, I do not know exactly what his handle is.
That's how it is, man. But there's too much stuff to remember. There's too much stuff.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. Thank you for listening. I'm Jeremiah O'Shantz. I'm going for Joe Lowry, backheel.com. This was No Sadietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, and we will catch you next time.
Let's go, Sounders.